Okay, welcome everybody to today's webinar. It's called Let's Talk Basics, Record Retention Before Turning on AI. And we're going to hold on for just a minute to let some more people get into the room. We've got people still logging in, so give us just about a minute here, and we'll get started. Okay, we're getting people logged in. Today's webinar, Let's Talk Basics, Records Retention Before Turning on AI, is going to be presented by our featured speaker, Wane Pemilar, and he's the CEO and co-founder of filerskeepers, as well as Lostronaut. And Wane is a top-tier tech and data lawyer and three-time entrepreneur, and he loves building tech solutions to legal problems he has personal experience firsthand. He has been in the trenches and has over a decade of work experience as a legal practitioner. And when it comes to developing software products, he insists on stellar design and a commitment to user empathy. In other words, he has felt your pain. So Wane, welcome.
Thank you. Uh, and thanks for having me, Robert. And Hi everyone. Let's talk about the basics and let's talk about AI and all of that. I wanna sorry, I'm trying to find
Give
the
us just
output
a
that
quick overview of your company, please.
yeah, sure. Sorry, I was just trying to find a button to go to the next slide. I found it now, guys. For filers keepers, what we do is we read all the laws in the world, take from their rules that tell companies how long they should store their records and data, and then we help apply those rules to the records and data of our clients. First and foremost, by building a retention schedule, and we have a dashboard where you can say, "Hey, I'm in these jurisdictions, can be countries, states. I'm in these industries," and then we build you a bespoke retention schedule right then and there in a few seconds. It's a draft. You can make any changes you'd like to it, and then. You can customize it, and then you can calculate what's the most optimal retention period given all the countries and states you're in. And then if the law changes, we can send you a ping and say, hey, the law has changed. It went from 3 to 4 years. Do you accept or decline? So you're in control of your schedule. And nowadays, now that our clients are, um, you know, they have an up-to-date retention schedule, they're all wondering like, how do we make this real within our systems? And that's something that I personally wake up with every single day. We're investing in connectors with all kinds of services, but that it's something that we need to tackle with the whole ecosystem of partners and solutions. It's not something we can do by ourselves. So you can see the stats here. We have 335 jurisdictions online. That's all the countries in the world. Um, and the biggest database in the world as far as we can oversee. But anyone, correct me in the chat if you feel like you know a bigger database.
And
Um,
that's more than all the countries because there's only like 193 countries.
Yeah, so so jurisdictions is countries and states. Yeah, so there are like 220 legal jurisdictions that you could call like federal national law, I guess. And then there are so many more states and we could still grow, to be honest. There are more than 335 jurisdictions, but we'll have everything in the US, Canada, Australia, Germany, Switzerland, yeah. But then Nigeria also has 30 plus states. So there's always a little bit more to be done. And should you be in Nigeria, just let us know. We'll be very happy to do the research there.
We had somebody from Nigeria in our last webinar, so that might be a possibility.
Yeah. So and definitely Africa is a huge growth market, and you see a lot of new tech there, and also a lot of new privacy tech there, by the way. Yeah. We're growing really rapidly. We now have 70 plus team members. Maybe what is fun to know is that we are a family-owned business. We don't have any outside investors. We did it all on our own strength, bootstrapped. And now I think we're growing from 70 plus people to about 90. Yeah, that's in the next few weeks. And that's because we also run another company called Lostronaut, and that one is growing really fast. If we have some time at the end, I'll tell a bit more about that then. Um, yeah, so that's us, and by reading all the laws, we see a lot, we know a lot. I myself have a background as a privacy practitioner, so I used to be in the team that did the very first binding corporate rules filing for Philips. We created it together with Philips. It's a data transfer regime now under the GDPR. Lobbied for it, got it approved. Now it's in the law, pretty cool. And I was also in the litigation panel for Facebook and some other big multinationals and did quite some of their litigations around Europe. So I've actually litigated the topic of data retention. I've seen the red spots in the necks of the regulators, so I also know what it takes to convince them of what is necessity. And I've also seen the real risks and the real emotion attached to data when you get in an order to delete because you have kept data for too long. So happy to kind of dive into that. Um, and Robert, you just interrupt me here anytime you wanna say
Okay.
something.
Yeah, and
Something.
if I get a
Yeah,
question, I'll throw it out to you. Yeah.
yeah, sure, sure.
Mhm.
Well, I think that everybody has already kind of bought into the pledge of AI, right? It's gonna means so many things for us. It's gonna be a big, driver for change. And already now I can see a huge difference between people who actually know how to use your average, Chat GPT and the ones who don't. Yeah. So I'm teaching my team, and I'm sometimes, really astonished by the big difference in level between how people use the tools. So, and I truly believe that AI is a huge, differentiator in productivity and everything. So it's actually a skill that you need to develop. So how I teach my children is like you need to be able to ask really good questions. Yeah. So and there's definitely some thinking involved there. But I also can see already a difference between companies using AI and using it to accelerate their operations versus the ones that aren't. So yeah, it's um, I I yeah. I think you mentioned when we were preparing, Robert, you mentioned like a study, right? From was it MIT or
Yeah,
yeah,
MIT study in the last couple of months said that over 90% of the pilot projects in AI have failed to meet their objectives. And I think part of the reason is poor governance, poor cleanup on the back end. They're trying to turn it on without,
yeah.
and feeding it garbage, basically.
Yeah, garbage in is garbage out. So it's not like this, right? Data in, money out. You need to do more stuff with that. But it's super real, and my predictions for AI is everything will happen, I guess, all the scenarios. So positive, it will revolutionize industries. It will enhance decision making. It will, you create really truly personalized experiences, which can also be a bit freaky sometimes. You can really believe in something that was built for you. And I do believe that there's a lot of scientific progress that we can make now if we use AI properly, because there's so many things we are yet to discover in science. And it's often very much a matter of just putting the compute power to work and crunching the numbers. And that's what AI does. But on the negative end, yeah, I also believe it will mean job displacement, algorithmic bias, privacy concerns, and maybe even in our worst case, as existential risk. Yeah. That, what would the world look like if there is an AI, a super system that is smarter than us, right? It's hard to comprehend, we might even, not be able to predict what that force is going to do. um it's a little bit like, I don't own a dog, but my parents have one, the dog has no idea what's next, right? And what we think for it, basically, and what we could do with it, to it, whatever. Yeah, the dog just knows, that it is part of a pack, and operates at its level of intelligence. So it doesn't know you're going to work and you're going to sit behind a computer and you're going to talk to people and what it is that you do. It doesn't care even. Yeah. And it could be that, the AI would be, in a similar relationship to us, where we have no clue what it's doing, but it's doing stuff. And
Just
yeah,
imagine
yeah,
robots that have all the knowledge of Google and all the knowledge of ChatGPT in them.
yeah,
And ChatGPT trained their model on 1 million hours of
yeah.
two videos on YouTube, so it knows all of that stuff. So imagine that much intelligence in a functional robot. That's scary.
Uh, it is. And I don't want to freak people out, but with my other company, Lostronaut, we are actually now creating a database with all the laws in the world that we feed to AI. Yeah. And we let the whole legal tech industry feed their solutions, yeah, with the data, basically. Yeah, can you imagine what AI could do if it has up-to-date data and all the laws it needs in order to make decisions? You could technically, for example, now with all the court cases, you can let AI write a brief, right, for a court case, and use all the court cases as input there, and it would be like a super associate. But it could even go further than that. It could write a brief for that specific judge that will hear the case. Um, and that judges, preferences, likes, dislikes, and all of that. So it can go pretty deep, right? Yeah. So the moment you unearth all the data, and you feed the AI with the data, and it has the processing power, then it could do a lot of things. Um, so for me, when I look at data, it doesn't have a lot of, value in itself. Yeah. It's about what you do with it. That creates the value. Um, and that's why all was well until the GDPR arrived. And the GDPR is not the only piece of privacy legislation. I happen to be European, so I'm slightly biased, of course, but I know that in the wake of the GDPR, so much, hundreds of privacy laws came to be everywhere in the world, and also in the US. And it was the and it still is the most beloved piece of legislation ever to have existed. And that's weird because it's privacy. And when I started my career as a privacy lawyer, everybody was like, it doesn't matter. Who cares about privacy? Keeping things secret. But that's not the case. I believe that privacy is about two things. It's first of all, making sure people get treated fairly and equally. Um, and the second thing is, that on the commercial side of how industries look at this, is that there is no IP right in personal data. Yeah. So, I mean, if there would be, Robert, I would happily license you, the use of my name. Um, but I can't. There is no such thing. So, um, um, privacy becomes the regulating factor, yeah, for all that data. And that's why it was so much beloved. And it took years. And at one point, the legislature, the EU legislature, had to physically remove the lobbyists from their buildings and lock the door. I'm not kidding, this actually happened. And so they could finally work through the thousands of amendments that were proposed in Parliament and the hundreds of amendments that were proposed in the European Council, which seats all the ministers. So and they came out with a piece of legislation that is still to today a compromise. On one hand, it's super industry friendly, beloved. You can see that, and on the other hand, it's very activistic, yeah, and lobby into the other direction.
And it did kind of a favor for the information governance space because essentially the first step in privacy management is to inventory your information assets.
Yeah,
You have to find where all that PII is and that personal
yeah,
data is before you can protect it or before you could respond to requests
definitely.
to provide it.
Yeah,
And that's essentially the same first step in information governance. We want to inventory our information assets so we know what we
yeah,
have, and we want to protect the most valuable information, those crown jewels, and work from
yeah,
the inside out versus the outside in. So it
yeah.
really was a big push that helped information governance as well.
It's such a great, flow that you have to go through, and I believe that organizations aren't even using it to the fullest extent yet. It's still usually like, InfoGov and privacy, and it needs to all come together, but it's also like business process management. Yeah. It's a great source of, truth, in the records of processing activities on how you have structured your business, what kind of different systems, what kind of different business processes you have, and you can streamline everything more. It's also just from general business and commercial sense, good to look at those things. Don't think it's happening enough, but I think, yeah, I mean, the GDPR has meant a lot, for the further professionalization of, and getting in control of your business, and that's not just privacy. That's broader than that.
Mhm.
Um, and that's also what, when finally they agreed on a final law, then I was there, at the when the law got signed, when the law got voted into law. Yeah, the bill got voted into law. So in the European Parliament, and it didn't matter who the speaker was, which political party the person was from. They all said the same thing. We want real compliance with this law. And they kept repeating it. We want real compliance. And what you've seen ever since is in all the enforcement, I believe the enforcement is still focused too much on only big tech. I think we could focus more on other companies as well. I'm hopefully not offending anyone here, but yeah, it's very clear. And we've seen it in enforcement all around. And now comes an interesting fact. In the US, the principles of the GDPR are pretty much law. Um, and it sounds really weird, but in the wake of the GDPR, you had the CCPA in California. You had then the CPRA that kind of, doubled down on the CCPA, made it even more like a GDPR style law. California is the biggest state in the US, so most companies are active in California. Um, and then it had a ripple effect to some other states. But then suddenly the FTC came with their GoodRx, Drizzly, and Cafe Press decisions or settlements. And suddenly we saw that there was this whole privacy law that they read into the Article 5 of the FTC Act, you know? Um, and that is very interesting, yeah? And I know why that is because I go to all those conferences, privacy conferences, right? In Europe. And who do I see there walk, on their badges and walking the floor? I see the members of the FTC and the Japanese privacy authority and a lot of authorities walking the floor every single year several times being beloved basically by the Europeans. And there's this huge network of privacy regulators, and they all talk to each other. And I don't want to sound all conspiracy on you, but it does influence people. So when they came back to the US and they had a few cases, they started to read a lot of things in there. And one of the most important rules that the FTC comes back to the whole time, it is no longer the necessary retention, creating a retention schedule. And it needs to be, at first it was like you need to have a retention schedule, you need to comply with it, which was news, of course, to these parties that didn't read the Article 5 of the FTC Act the same way. There wasn't much guidance on this. There were hints. So um, the FTC really believes that it's no longer necessary. And then there were even more cases, yeah. And after Cafe Press Drizzly, there was Check, and there was BetterHelp, which is one of the more famous brands in the US nowadays. But
And
also,
that,
yeah,
that limitation principle, that's one of the 10 generally accepted privacy principles, which is a
yeah,
limitation. You're only supposed to retain that private PII as long as the person that has authorized or consented to you using it, as long as you
yeah,
execute the task that they consented to. But it also is a demonstration of the retention principle and the generally accepted record keeping principles. So
yeah,
it follows in both information governance and privacy principles.
yeah. And what the Blackboard settlement of 2024 added to this was that you have to adopt a retention schedule and a retention policy, and you should actually also publish that thing on the internet. Now that's a bridge too far for most companies. Like, okay, I'm not that confident about my retention posture anyhow. Now I need to make a public commitment, on how long we keep things in detail. But that's something to really look into for anyone on the call who needs to be compliant with the FTC.
Well, the
Uh,
first step is just
yeah,
getting them to publish it internally.
yeah.
You know,
Definitely, you need to start there. And then, yeah, under the COPPA, sorry, this is a bit of an older slide, so I should have made an update. I'm sorry. But there was a proposal now, it's actually a rule. But under COPPA, the COPPER, right? The rule under the COPPA, they also really specialized, specified now that the information on children needs to be deleted once they are no longer necessary. But they
and
did add the word reasonably. Yeah. So
COPA is the Children's Privacy Act, right?
yeah, that's a U.S. federal Children's Online Privacy Act. Yeah.
Mhm.
So anyone who's dealing with kids info will need to look at that rule. Um, so and that's a big break from what's used what used to be the fashion in the US, and that is if you do retention and you build a retention schedule, you look at the federal rules and all the different state rules and you pick the longest, right? You say, oh well, California says 3 years and US federal says 5, but here is a rule in Minnesota, yeah, that says 10 years, so we're just gonna go for 10 years because then we'll be compliant everywhere. Well, that's no longer the case. If California says 3 years and Minnesota has a rule that says 10 years, yeah, then you can't just say, oh, I'm going to keep it 10 years because the Californian, privacy authority won't agree to that. They will say, well, that's not binding here, right? Yeah, you have to implement that in Minnesota, not here. It's 3 years. So that's something that I think is a big change. And then also recent decision in California, they extended the application of the CCPA, CPRA to employees more, and especially candidates. Um, Maybe every one of you are like, oh yeah, that's sure that was in the making. For me, it came as a surprise because I thought those were not your typical consumer, you know? So it seems to also be now expanded more broadly to employee protection. Um, so the story continues. In the EU by now, it is like every single case, yeah, by the CNIL has a retention component to it. So the CNIL is the French Data Protection Authority. So they and the fines aren't that high, okay? So I'll be candid there. You know, they're a couple 100,000, maybe 1 million. Yeah, that's what they do nowadays. But they have a pretty strict rule, and that says, thou shalt keep the data no longer than 3 years, yeah, for customer data. Now, um, sometimes, a lot of companies will fail that test because they keep data longer, like 5 years, whatever. And then they go like, no, that's not, in accordance with our guidance. So you have to now pay that money. And they're unique, by the way, in the world, but they do ask the question, and it's a pretty, easy question for them to ask, right? Hey, how old is your data? Prove it to us. And you have to show it, and then when the data is older than 3 years, they will slap you on the wrist. I think there's a lot to be said about that. Yeah, I think you could definitely go and appeal, because 3 years is in a lot of cases really unmanageable, because you have a longer relationship with your customers. So I don't think the final word has been said about this, but yeah, I'm truly hoping that everybody appeals those kind of decisions. And then okay, yeah. So then also like Meta also has data retention limits, and there's a lot of enforcement in the U.S. But then in the U.S., the pendulum can swing the other way. There's a lot of case law about and decisions about companies not keeping data long enough. Yeah. So then welcome to the tightrope, right? You can't keep it too short, but you can definitely not keep it too long, but you can definitely also not keep it too short. Yeah. So SEC has gone after, advisory firms, municipal advisors. OFAC has issued guidance. Also in state, Massachusetts cannabis regulators are going after, record keeping fines. So you see a whole lot of things here happening. Um, and sometimes it's just ad hoc, pick out one company, and sometimes it's more systemic when they go literally after a whole bunch because they find one issue, they will write a letter to the entire industry, say, hey, tell more about this. Yeah. Um, and I think this is not, again, also not up to date. I think we have Oklahoma and then some others also on here, but it's also Colorado, Minnesota, Virginia. They have all like, keep data no longer than necessary. And then you have states like Arkansas where they say keep data no longer until no longer required to be retained. That is a different way of formulating. I don't know exactly what that means. I'm not sure if there is real guidance or case law about this already, but it sounds like you can interpret that as a no longer than necessary, yeah, if they like. Um, so
Yeah, we're stuck with this patchwork until we get a federal law, which has been kicked around for like
yeah,
3 years or so now, and it still hasn't, they still can't come to a compromise. So,
it
make things a lot easier.
you never know what's going to happen, right? The big tech is definitely advocating for it because it's too hard for them to manage all the different states. Because in a way, the US is the EU on steroids. So, if you all have a different law, it's going to be pretty difficult to manage that. So in the EU, it says that you should not keep any personal data for no longer than is necessary for the purposes for which the data are processed. Yeah. So not just collected, but also subsequently processed. And in Minnesota, for example, it says no longer relevant and reasonably necessary in relation to the purposes for which the data were collected and processed. So again, processed. Yeah. But what isn't different is no longer relevant and reasonably necessary. Um, so, what I find interesting is the word reasonable. I don't know what that means. I know what necessity means, and now we'll dive into that a little bit more in a minute. But reasonably, yeah, I think it tries to kind of lower the bar a little bit. I guess, from the EU framework.
Pretty subjective though, so it makes it hard for people to, to find their way through that patchwork of regulations.
Yeah, yeah. So for me, I kind of we worked out what necessity means. Yeah, we did a very thorough study of European case law and guidance and all the legislative history. So I can share with you what the outcome was there in a few slides. Um, but what then the word reasonably adds to that is not really clear for me. Yeah. I think it should be within a sort of business sense, right? And maybe not lead to like excessive cost or effort in order to get that achieved. I think that's it. But I don't think that would then put you completely out of jail. Say, oh, well, now we don't have to implement this. Yeah. Um, so yeah. So to keep or delete, I think well, I'll skip this one. I think the challenge of no longer the necessary is what does that mean, deletion or anonymization? Well, it means it's irreversible. The moment you hit delete, the data won't come back. Yeah. So if you're wondering like what does it mean like soft deletion, like we kind of hide it or we delete it from one system, we keep it in another, keep it in an archive, whatever. No, compliant deletion is irreversible. Um, and it's also auditable. You should be able to demonstrate that you have gone through all the motions and you have now, that has led to the desired effect, meaning the data is actually gone and you can prove that, which is a bit of a loop that you can get into. Um, and the same goes for anonymization. So a few slides back, um, kept in a form which permits identification of data subjects, right? So technically you could say, I don't need to delete it, right? I just need to anonymize it so that I can no longer identify the data subject, the individual. And the thing is with anonymization, it's only truly anonymous if it's also irreversible. And this is a highly contagious discussion basically. Because if you talk to the average HR analytics tool provider, they'll say that, oh yeah, everything got filled in anonymously, the data is anonymous, that's it. Yeah. But if you can work out who gave the answer, even though you don't have their name, so for example, it's a team of three people and one has a very outspoken opinion, and you can see that in the answers, you know who gave the answers. You can identify someone by means of the answers. And we always believe that I always say it's the police test. If the police can identify you, then, you know, then it's personal data. In other words, it could be, middle-aged man with brown hair and a hat, you know. Then if that is enough, and the shoe size that of this, yeah. Then if you don't need their name because you can identify them through their characteristics, and you can find a man, yeah. And unfortunately, with anonymization, there is about 40 years of statistical research that shows that in any anonymous data set, there is a residual risk of re-identification. And this can bite you in the behind. You can do all you want. Yeah, you can anonymize according to the most modern techniques. And then if in hindsight someone can be re-identified, bloop, the whole data sets becomes personal data again. So I always say that if you want to do it in a purest sense, anonymization is a security mechanism, not per se something that gets you out of jail, out of the, privacy law territory. But that's a very theoretical, perspective. If I were to be your lawyer, I would say let's fight it in court and let's go. Yeah. Because we've tried our best and it's anonymous and we can trust that. Again, it also needs to be auditable, so you need to be able to explain what you did to do it. And please, removing a name is not enough. You need to do more. Yeah. Synthetic data might be a good alternative. You actually do both. You build a new data set that isn't related to the original data set yet produces the same statistical outcomes, but you delete the original data set. Deletion is the ultimate sign of trust. Yeah. It shows some form of selflessness, yeah, to your user, to your employee, to your client, yeah. So if you say, I care so much about our relationship that I'm willing to delete your data, even if it provides value to me, that will lead to trust. And even so, we did a study with one of our partners. It can increase trust up to 50%. Yeah, especially if you tell them about what you're doing. Yeah. So if that's one of your goals, then and deletion is very scary, of course, because we are by nature hunter-gatherers. We like to hold on to stuff that we collect for our own survival. Yeah, and that instinct kicks up when it comes to business, and therefore we want to keep and hold on to all that data. Um, So how does an audit look like? Um, Usually they don't come in for a violation of retention, okay? So that's the good news. Usually, regulators come in because there was a complaint about something you did or not did, or there's a breach, a hack, that you needed to notify. And once they come in, they will ask all kinds of questions. And one of the things they will do is they want to see the application. And I've seen that in actual cases. And regulator says open the application, and the admin comes and opens the application. They go like, no, 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 I want to see the database level. So then you open up the database level, and then they go line by line. Hey, what's this data? Who has access? Why are you keeping it? How long are you keeping it? Why are you keeping it this long? And then a lot of companies will just fail the test, yeah, if it goes at that level of granularity. Um, and it's very impactful. And you need to. I actually saw the situation where the order to delete came in, and a team of 25 data analysts was sent home because there was no data anymore, so they didn't have a job anymore, because the data was gone. So, it also has a very personal impact on data analysts. And that's why I always tell the data analysts, like, let's work on a retention policy based on actual laws, because that's a very solid defense. You need to convince the regulator. You need to get them out of their comfort zone. You know, a privacy regulator doesn't know that many laws. Yeah. Um, so what you can do is completely, you know, flood them with the 10,000 rules that are applicable to your business. Yeah. This law and that law, and, in China, it's this, in Russia, it's that, in Europe, it's this, and in California, it's that. And then they will be like, okay, okay, this looks solid. You've thought about it. Okay. They can't argue every single law with you. So they'll probably pick their battles. Yeah. And they will challenge you on one thing. But at least the moment you have a policy, your fine has already decreased. You've done the prep work. Maybe you haven't implemented it well. And that's still the issue. But, the more conscious you are and the more you've tried your best, the more lenient they will become.
Yeah, just a reasonable effort is what they're looking for in
Yeah.
general. They're not looking for perfection because things happen, but did you make the effort? Did you try? Did you plan? Do you have policies that address that? And sometimes
Yeah.
you'll have a hiccup, but did you try to put the policy in place and try to follow it?
Yeah. And look, regulators also know themselves that this isn't very easy. I know because the regulators for their own internal processes are our customer, some of them are, yeah. So that's also hilarious, right? And they come knocking on our door like, oh yeah, we have a retention project and we need the rules in, Slovakia or Netherlands or whatever it is. So that's kind of funny. But then after that, they are aware of, what the rules are, and then they are ready to enforce it. So yeah. Um, you need to be able to assess necessity. Um, and that's difficult. So what does that mean? Well, keep data no longer than necessary for the purposes for which you're processing the data. Yeah. So how do you do that? And we think we've worked this out pretty well. First of all, you need to figure out what the purpose is, right? For which you process data. That's in your ROPAs, your records of processing activities register. That's in your privacy statement. Yeah. Um, and then you need to define what is your business need for the retention period. Yeah. So say that the law doesn't specify the retention period. The only thing you can go by is no longer than necessary under privacy law. Yeah. So I've ruled out the situation where you actually have guidance or law. Um, well, then maybe the business goes, I need it for 10 years. And then you need to ask why 10 years. Well, then the business goes, well, our product life cycle is 10 years and we want to be relevant at the end of the product life cycle for our customer. I think that's a legitimate reason. Yeah, 10 years is a bit long, but I think the being relevant at the end of the product life cycle. Okay. Um,
Well, Juan, is a
yeah.
middle ground, could a middle ground be maybe disposition the record but retain the metadata?
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that we could, look at. Yeah. So I'll get there, by the way. That's a very good point. I kind of looped that in at the end of this
Mm.
exercise. But so once you know why you need to keep it this long, that you're only what you need to do is you need to be able to prove that business need. Yeah. So you make this statement that your product life cycle is 10 years, then the business better prove that. Yeah. And they can do that qualitatively or quantitatively. Qualitatively by means of a example, yeah, or multiple examples, or quantitatively by means of statistics, right? Usually the data analysts that want to hold on to the data longer, so why don't you ask them to stir up a few statistics about this? Um, so that's once you have that, now you have proven your business need. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have proven necessity. Yeah. So that's where we turn it upside down. And we would say, hey, what if we play devil's advocate and we tell you just keep it half or maybe three-quarters of that duration? So the regulator, we're going to pretend we're the regulator, and the regulator will say, no, not 10 years, 5 years. That's what you get. And then the response should be, what happens if it becomes 5 years? And then ideally, your business is going to say, then something breaks. We can't do that. It will break. So what will break then? Yeah. Well, we believe that, we can't see these trends anymore that we need in order to be relevant. Okay. Can you prove that part as well, qualitatively and quantitatively? Yeah. Necessity is all about it's necessary. If you cannot, it's necessary to achieve it. So if you don't have it, something will break. You won't be able to achieve your goal. Yeah. And then you need to note any other mitigating measures. Yeah. So that can be, Robert, to your point, but it can also be um, archiving, restricting access, all kinds of data minimization, reducing raw copies, whatever. Or what you said, like keep the metadata, get something else, or pseudonymize it. Yeah, there's so many things you could do, to make it
Redaction, possibly. Yeah.
action. Yeah, so there's so much you can do to make it more acceptable. Yeah. Um, but this is kind of like how you do that and it's a big investment. So I don't propose that everybody goes and does this for their candidate records or something, right? Candidate records, you can just, put a retention period on it, and that needs to kind of, meet a balance between what you need to do under US federal, like your EEOC filings and all of that, versus what's, the maximum caps in Europe, if you happen to be in Europe. So yeah, but this is really for where it becomes very important, and where it becomes bad the company, and where if you would get that order into delete, it would really, really impact your business. That's when you want to basically preempt the case, because, you know, going back to this one, I had a use case, a case where the regulator came in, and it was digital television provider, and they were keeping all kind of like viewer details on when people watched a certain program on television. And the regulator came in and asked them, what's your retention period? They said 6 months. And then they said, why? And I said, well, sometimes people ask us questions about their quality or something of the broadcast. I said, okay, prove it. And then it was quiet on the end of my client, and we were approaching the deadline. I was getting nervous. Hey, do we have anything? And it went like finally, like 2 days before, and it went like, yeah, we got a case here. This lady asked a question 4 months after, the program aired. And they were so relieved. And okay, so we submitted that. And they went like, okay, great. Now you have proven your case for a 4 month retention period. So like, okay, so once it gets real, it gets really real. Yeah. That's the whole point. Robert, how long do these sessions take? I'm taking already like quite some time. Do I need to speed up? What's the time
We
check?
have another 12, 13 minutes.
Okay, okay. I'll try to wrap up, so see if we can have any questions. So in our tool, we actually have, functionality around this, where we guide you through a series of questions to get to that point. I'll skip over all of that stuff if you don't mind. Um, we have a retention schedule, and software, and yeah, it sounds so easy. You say, oh, just comply with the law, and that's it. But what if those rules are conflicting, right? Keep data at minimum 50 years for payroll in Poland. Keep it delete after 7 years, or is it 5 in the Netherlands? How can you ever reconcile those two? So you will have to make choices. Those choices aren't going to be perfect. And that's something that I wanna talk about a little bit. Um, as I see it, companies have three problems. First of all, they don't know the law. And, we could help, and we have competitors that can help. But then, as soon as you do know the law, what choices do you make? Because those choices can be difficult, and you can't even always comply with everything at the same time. And then how do you implement that in a very, very complex IT and records landscape? But you will have to, because first of all, you're not compliant. I believe that AI will amplify everything. Yeah. So your non-compliance with regards to retention will just be made worse by, turning on Copilot. First of all, the outcomes will be less good, because the older the data, the less relevant. But also, the AI can have access to data it shouldn't have access to, and it could start saying things it shouldn't say. Yeah. Um, I can do a whole series about how to implement into structured, unstructured systems. Something that I care deeply about. But I really think you should put in the effort. Don't promise your leadership that you're gonna solve all their problems at once. No, I think you should really get a retention schedule out and then start implementing it, say in Workday or your HRM system, SAP SuccessFactors, whatever it is, and show that it can be done. For a structured system. Start there before you start thinking even of tackling unstructured systems. Learn what it is to hit delete. See how nervous the business gets when you hover your finger above the purge button. They suddenly want to validate everything. They want to know everything. They want to be there and decide with you. Suddenly they'll be very interested in records retention, guys. Once you actually start, deleting their data. And that's also why I have a bit of a plea with you, and that is that I really 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 wish that all the companies stop firing their IG professionals. I see a concerning trend where either people go retire. A whole golden generation of records managers and IG professionals are retiring now, and they are not being replaced. And I see also a lot of people being let go. And I think that's ridiculous. I think that IG professionals are an essential tool in the toolkit of a general counsel, chief privacy officer, a CISO, head of data. Because and if there are any records managers in the room, you are the guardians of data quality, data minimization, retention, purpose limitation, even security. And those are a lot of times topics that the privacy professionals kind of shy away from, and they go like, "Yeah, that's for the business to determine." Yeah. If you think about it, GDPR is just getting ready for AI. So you need to do data minimization. You need to check the data quality. And if there's one professional that knows about what matters to the company, it's the IG professional. They've actually spent the time looking at it, maybe in the paper reality. Maybe I'm also pretty tough, for the IG professionals. I always say, get your head out of the boxes, please. Yeah, set up a whole you know program to get rid of the boxes. And that's the final thing you should do, and move to digital. That's where they care about, what they care about. That's where we can run the AI. And if what's in those boxes is so important, then take the money, get the budget, and scan them. But the time of paper is over in most cases. Um, and but if the IG professional transitions to a more AI data ready type role to advise on what is quality, on the advice to get rid of rot, to determine what is rot, and then have IT operationalize that. I think that's very valuable.
I
Uh,
think
yeah,
a good thing that IG professionals can do is to sort of rebrand information governance as more like AI readiness.
yeah,
Call yourselves the AI readiness department instead of information
yep,
governance, because some companies just don't, they
yeah,
just have a negative reaction to the words information
yeah,
governance. And you've got absurd examples out there, like Sony Pictures eliminated their information governance department. And apparently they don't remember about 6 or 7 years ago when they had a data breach and they had to actually pull a movie from release and because it was about this North American dictator and made fun of him, and had to go to DVD because they threatened to bomb theaters. So that was all a result of an information governance failure. And they implemented IG after that and had a department, but now they've gotten rid of it. And I've seen that happen in other types of companies as well, even highly regulated companies like financial services. So it's very disconcerting to see that trend.
yeah. I cannot speak to Sony in particular, but I think in general, I think it's a trend I see, and it worries me, because I believe that this AI will be a beast, and we need to somehow control it, and we need to put, everything we can as possibly can as human beings to control it. Um, and IG professionals are way too modest in what they can mean there. Yeah. And I think that the profession is really at risk. And I also believe that the profession should be way more vocal about the value it can bring to the business and show that value to the business and to leadership. Um, and um, so I always ho have hope, and I hope, I know I'm happy to tell you that I bring this topic as well to, whenever I go to do like a legal tech talk, because I own a legal tech company now called Lostronaut. And when I go to privacy professionals and general legal, I bring this topic as well. Yeah. So it's not just that I'm like here, that we're here in our own echo bubbles, repeating this. I really want to bring this message to the rest of the world as well. Um, yeah, maybe let's and maybe just to give you an idea, yeah, with Laws or Not, we actually crawl all the laws in the world, and we let others build AI tools and products, legal tech products on top of our data. Yeah, so that's the other business. Are there any questions that I can
Yeah, if
answer?
anybody has questions, you could just send it to us in the chat or Q&A. But just to sort of summarize, wanting just sort of, there's a lot here and a lot on IG professionals' plate. So what's a good way to get started? What sort of initiatives can they take?
Yeah, so I think that everybody is in a situation where the organization wants to turn on Copilot or something, or they have turned it on already. But now nobody's really happy with the outcomes of the tool. I think that's where, an IG professional can say, hey, I can think along, I can help. I know what's going wrong here. Yeah. You got way too many rotten here. We need to fix that. Data is too old, We're getting conclusions that were relevant 10 years ago, but you need something that's more up to date. You haven't organized your data in a proper way, and the AI doesn't know how to handle that. But also, the data is simply not AI ready. You need to tokenize it. You need to actually make it worth. You need to translate it into AI language. That's it. So the data itself needs to be more processed.
You know,
Um,
the kind of the
yeah,
holy grail is to get the retention schedule in place and to be able to convert the unstructured information into structured data, and then you can feed it into the AI systems and it makes
yeah,
sense of it. But you're right, when companies just turn on Copilot and they think that's a panacea, it's
yeah.
magically going to give them AI without doing the back end legwork to clean things up, then they're not going to get the results that they're looking for. And that's why we've got this studies saying that they haven't been meeting their objectives for these AI pilots.
Yeah, so I think you need to kind of look into where are the opportunities in your business. I don't think you should kind of like go there and say, "Hey, you're doing it all wrong." No, no, no. It's more like, "Hey, I'm here to help and facilitate and meet your goals." Yeah, you
Yeah,
need
I mean, if
to,
they could tell, if you can learn from the business, what are the top use cases for AI? And
yeah.
then go back and from an IG standpoint, say, okay, what can we do to clean things up for that particular use case to make it effective?
Yeah, and you'll see that will probably be the most effective you've ever been, because suddenly they will be all ears. Yeah. Don't go the kind of like negative turn and like there's one
Compliance kind of
client that
stuff. Yeah.
literally yeah went like No, you cannot turn Copilot on until we got our retention schedule implemented. Then all eyes are on you, and then it's all like everybody's looking at the clock, like, okay, fix it then. So that's also not the right way. I think you should also let folks fall in their own trap, and then go and build. Yeah. So all right. I think we're at
I think
time.
we're
Yeah.
right at about time right now, Wani, and if anybody has questions, you could email me, and I'm at robert@infogovworld.com, and I'll relay them to Wani, and we'll get them answered. And just to remind you, less than 2 weeks away, InfoGov World will be in San Diego, October 27th, our pre-con session, which is the SEGO AI training, as well as an executive forum on AI governance. And then the conference itself is Tuesday and Wednesday, which is the 28th and 29th. And if you're a privacy person, the evening of the 29th is when the IAPP Privacy, Security, and Risk Conference opens up in San Diego as well. So a lot of people are attending both. And we've actually scheduled our privacy sessions on the final day, which is Wednesday, the 29th. So that if you're a privacy person, you can can come in and catch those sessions and then go on to the IAPP event if need be. And I think filers keepers will be at both as well, I think.
Yeah, we'll be there.
Okay,
Really looking forward to seeing you all there.
very good. Thanks very much, Juane, and we appreciate everyone's time and attention.
All right. Have a nice day, guys.
Thank you.